Alrighty. Have you put the... We're live? We're live, we're streaming live. Hello everybody. Okay, you can see I'm a bit silly today. Alright, so welcome everyone. We would like to acknowledge this land that we meet on today as the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. Okay, attendance record. All the Audit Committee members are here. Welcome Ben for his first in-person meeting. It's nice of you to join us, which is good. Apologies, no one from the committee but management, Chris Cowley, isn't an apology today because he's unwell. 2.3, motions to grant a leave of absence. Do you have any motions? No. 2.4, leave of absence. No leave of absence. And 2.5, non-attendance, just management. Okay, item 3 is the declarations of interest. Are there any interests to declare? None noted. Item 4 is the confirmation of minutes. Hopefully everyone's had time to to review those. Have I got a mover for the minutes? Christine, seconder. Councillor Davies, all in favour? Carried unanimously. And item 5, is there any business arising from the minutes? No? All pretty straightforward. Okay, moving right along. So we're going to the decision reports. So 6.1 is the FY25 Audit and Risk Committee Annual Report. Renee, did you want to speak to that one?
Thank you, through the Chair. This item presents the draft 2024 to 2025 Audit and Risk Committee Annual Report for the Committee's adoption and Council's subsequent endorsement. The report outlines the Committee's key achievements and activities over the financial year, including reviews of the budget, long-term financial planning, risk management, and internal and external audit processes. As required under Section 126 of the Local Government Act, the annual report is also included in Council's annual report. So the recommendation also allows for minor administrative amendments to be made by the CEO where they don't change the intent of the document, and I'm happy to take any questions or feedback on the draft.
Are there any questions or comments? I think it's overall it is a very thank you for management for pulling together everything that we've done in the last year. It makes me feel quite tired, but I think we have achieved a lot, which is good, and it shows that we have achieved the objectives of the Audit and Risk Committee, which is a good thing. Included in the annual report, with some assistance from management, I had included a chair's comments. If I just scroll down, which I'd just like to quickly read out, as we normally do. So, the Audit and Risk Committee's activities for the FY25 year summarises the work of the committee for the past year and the continued focus on risk and assurance within the Council and the various reports from external audit and internal audit. A key focus of the Audit and Risk Committee continues to be reviewing the financial performance of the Council to ensure the Council returns to an operating surplus position and reduces its reliance on debt to fund operations. The financial strategy of the Council must continue to focus on balancing the needs and desires of the community with the long-term financial health of the Council. To become financially sustainable, the current financial landscape must be at the forefront of Council decisions as it undertakes the ongoing review of its long-term financial plan. The importance of a robust long-term financial plan which guides the Council on its journey to financial sustainability cannot be underestimated. As a result, the Audit and Risk Committee worked with management and Council to consider the assumptions and endorse a budget for the Council to deliver an operating surplus by FY26 financial year, forming a solid foundation for the Council and delivery of its goal to become a financially sustainable Council. The Committee has also worked closely with management to finalise a number of detailed asset management plans, so thanks to Wendy, as well as the Strategic Asset Management Plan and the committee commends management on the good outcome of a comprehensive review performed by ASCOSA in their Town of Gawler local government advice for FY25. So, you know, well done management. That was a lot of work for, you know, a good outcome for that report. I would like to acknowledge the professionalism and active participation of the Audit and Risk Committee during the reporting period. The level of discussion on matters brought before the committee has been of a very high standard, which I believe has resulted in tangible benefits to the community and council. The committee has also greatly benefited from the contributions of the Mayor and Council committee members who, I should say the Deputy Mayor standing in for the Mayor, who bring significant local knowledge and local community experience to meetings. I would like to thank Mayor Karen Redman and Peter Fairley-Jones for their long-term contribution to the committee over multiple terms, and we welcome Ben Watkins and Councillor Cody Davis on his return to the committee. I wish to record my appreciation of the work undertaken by council management and staff in supporting the work of the committee and the transition to the new Chief Executive Officer, Chris Cowley. I would also like to record my appreciation of the high standards of the financial and internal control reporting provided to the committee by Ms Sharon Perkins, and also the support from Renee and Erin and everyone else here, the dedicated finance and governance teams. Well done, team. I know that you, and we'll address this later in the papers, that it has been a hard time, you know, with the people, you know, being absent, so well done. So that was pretty much summarising my comments. So if we go back up to the recommendation, so I'll just go off the screen, that we're there's two, wasn't there? We're adopting it, and then we're recommending to council that it's endorsed and included into the annual report. Do I have a mover? Christine, the seconder. Ben, well done, Ben. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, we'll move to the next item, which is the Audit and Risk Committee work plan. Renee, did you want to have a quick word to this one?
Thank you. Through the Chair, this report presents the draft 2025 to 2026 Audit and Risk Committee work plan for the committee's review and adoption. It outlines the key activities scheduled for the year ahead, consistent with the terms of reference and building on the work undertaken this financial year. The report also proposes a meeting schedule for the coming financial year and provides a clear framework for the committee to meet its responsibilities in governance, risk and financial oversight.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Yes, Councillor Davies.
So I guess this is slightly beyond the scope of the year, but around July it would start the period where you'd soon be getting into caretaker mode for the general elections and all of that. So just any commentary around how that might change what happens with the audit committee.
Susie?
Through the Chair, sorry, I'm just going to have to lean over a bit. In terms of the dates there, I don't envisage there's any problems with a November election and a July meeting, but the Elections Act and the Local Government Act together provide the legislative basis that we have to follow during the caretaker period, which is generally about 8 weeks out from the elections. So I think post these dates, when we're looking further forward, can definitely make sure that there's no designated decisions being made during that period, which is a decision that's a certain percentage of your operating revenue. There are exceptions to expenditure during the caretaker period. So if there is a natural disaster, emergency type event, emergency works are needed for stormwater purposes or road maintenance purposes that are above that value, they are exempt from having, the restriction on making that decision doesn't apply. But that's definitely something we'll be very mindful of, looking further past the 7th of July date next year. BAU business of the council, and given the Audit and Risk Committee is structured the way it is so that independent members are greater in numbers than council members, and generally the committee wouldn't have sub-delegation to make a designated decision necessarily in their own right. Things like a prudential management report, potentially, but the committee is just making a recommendation. They're not making a decision in their own right. But generally, this will be the first election that I've been employed at the town of Gawler, so first period with this current mayor's one, and then the full term. Generally, I think councils err on the side of caution when looking at their business. Something that we've started doing is plotting 3 months worth of council meeting reports, and I work on that spreadsheet every time prior to the executive team meeting, so they can see what's coming up, what's scheduled for what meeting, and that will be key to planning through the caretaker period when we're looking at what things need to be done. Because it's not just infrastructure projects, it's things like, or great expenditures, it's things like events, because incumbents who might run again shouldn't be using any events for anything other than BAU. So looking really at what you can do outside of the caretaker period.
Yep. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? No. And I think what I've seen in past years at Gawler too, we've got our standard meetings, but then we also can add meetings or timing of meetings if we need to, get through something before certain dates. So we sort of use these as the core meetings, and then if we have to put in a couple of extra meetings, then we can do that. All right, cool. So you can see the officer's recommendation up on the screen is to adopt the work plan. There's the meetings for the year, and there may be a special committee meeting in March to review the FY27 budget with the date to be confirmed. So do I have a mover? Deputy Mayor Shanks, the seconder. Councillor Davies. All in favour? Carry unanimously. Am I calling you the wrong thing? Oh, you're acting mayor. Okay, sorry, the acting mayor. You need like your hat. Sorry. Just we'll just change that on the record. Yeah. Cool. All right. Then item 7 is the information reports, and 7.1 is the adopted FY26 annual business plan and budget for anyone that hasn't seen this document yet. You can do the pop quiz on that one. Renee, did you want to have a word on that?
Thank you. Through the Chair, this report provides an overview of the 25-26 annual business plan and budget, which was adopted by Council at its meeting on the 23rd of June 2025. Most importantly, the budget achieves the Audit and Risk Committee's recommendation that Council return to an operating surplus in this financial year, with a projected surplus of 181,000, which excludes the net gains from regional subsidiaries. The adopted plan reflects significant changes following community consultation, including a reduction in the general rate increase of, a reduced general rate increase of 4.9%, revised growth projections, and a reduction in operating and capital expenditure. It also maintains a strong focus on financial discipline with no borrowings allocated to operating costs. The rating strategy and capital works program have been shaped to balance community expectations and service deliverability and long-term sustainability. And so today the committee is asked to note the adopted position, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Yep. Acting Mayor.
I just had some comments. I won't be too hard because we've already had the opportunity to debate this one. But members, it's been a bit of a roller coaster. You know, it's goals that the committee set to get us back to surplus were blatantly told, no, that's just impossible. You know, we might be able to do it in a couple of years. But credit to Sharon and the team and Chris as well. I think it was really a joint effort to go, no, if we achieve this and we think a little outside the box, and I might be reading between the lines here, but I saw some support that might not have been there in the past to actually have some different thinking, and we are seeing some of the dividends pay now, and you'll also note that our rate revenue was lower by nearly half of what we forecast. Our assumption we were hoping to make from rate revenue was only, what was it, 1.06 instead of the 2 that was hopefully going to set us up. Now, we're not too worried about that at this point in time. We think there's probably going to be a correction come when the developments start amping up and coming online, and we're seeing some positive signs of that in assessments coming through. So I think there is going to be a little bit of a catch-up, but the fact that we went out and we said, look, we're probably going to need a 6% to report a minor surplus of, I think it was around 80 grand, is now we're actually going to be able to go out as a residential rate increase, Headline Act, of 4.8%, 4.9 across the board, and report a surplus of $181,000, rejig our long-term financial plan to get rid of the 6% as a rolling compound, and keep it at those, between those 3s and 4s and you know, around that. So it just goes to show what you can do when you plan for the worst and hope for the best, and keep on ticking, you know, keep on going at it. Yes, we're copping some scrutiny still, obviously. No one wants to pay rates in general. But I think empowering elected members like myself to be able to say, we're actually managing debt to get our debt position in good debt rather than bad debt, and showing how that works. Some of the sustainable savings are around those staffing reviews, not just backfilling because, and then embedding them throughout the saving journey. So yeah, I'm certainly excited to see how this budget goes, because I think this is the first year. This is going to be the test to see if our strategy really pays off. But I'm feeling like we're coming from a place of data-based education decision-making rather than some of the political ones we've seen in the past.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Davies.
Yeah, and to echo everything that Nathan said, but also just in terms of, I think one of the most important things isn't just how this year's budget went, it's that our long-term financial plan is looking like we're going to be making sustained savings, where we're not just going to come back next year again asking for an 8% because we shuffled some things around this year. We're actually making sustained changes that mean that we'll be able to have a better foundation.
So along similar lines of what has already been said, there was a time when we were being told it wouldn't be possible to make a surplus, and we were feeling a bit like the tough Audit and Risk Committee. So well done to everyone involved for turning it around to surplus for this budget year.
Yeah. And yeah, same sentiment, because we were on the Audit Committee at the same time. The year that the increase was rejected, and this management's done a really good job of, you know, socialising, communicating, you know, getting the messaging right, that has set the council up for success, which is nice to see, and as was, you know, has been commented on, that I think, you know, there's a higher level of maturity around budgeting, which will flow into the long-term budget, which is nice to see. So thanks everyone, and thanks to management for all of their very hard work, because these things just don't magically happen. And also, yeah, the elected members that are on the Audit Committee too, for the messaging and communication back to council. I think that's been very, very helpful. So thank you. Is there any other comments? No? Okay, so have I got a mover for the annual budget? Christine, I'll second it. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Yay. Okay, 7.2 is the update to the policy review schedule for then council policies overdue for review. Susie, did you want to talk to this one?
I think the report fairly well covers it. The meeting was moved a couple of weeks prior and due to staff leave, I just didn't have enough scope in the time frame to follow the process which has been presented of the policy governance framework. And I didn't really think it was really good for the first policies to go through that process, not to follow it, which would have had to occur for those policies to be here tonight. There was a bit of method to the madness of draft scheduling so many governance ones at the start, and that was so that they can be used to train and educate the other staff who will be doing the policy reviews through the framework, rather than just doing a mock-up of a policy. I thought, well, what better way to sort of have a template or guide to follow than some actual policies in the new templates that have followed what the framework's trying to deliver with our policy library. So I've now received the dates for all the upcoming executive team meetings, so I can kind of work backwards with the schedule. And that's why it was subject to change. I guess meetings are subject to change sometimes, and so it needs to be fluid. It's still very much a key project for me to work on. It's just going to be pushed back a little bit. Yeah.
Yep. Are there any comments or questions for Susie? Yep, Ben.
I see, and in one of the upcoming papers we talk about an internal audit plan and talking about policy and framework review. Is your change in timing going to have any impact on that?
Good question.
Through the chair, that is a very good question, Ben, and it's one that I have looked at myself when I was reviewing the papers in the agenda. It's something I'll have to take up with the risk advisor and Renee and work out what we can look at implementing there, because very well could be the case. I've got to schedule in staff diaries some education and training sessions, which I suspect I'll probably deliver via Teams, and then they can get uploaded and have some little hints and tips and tricks. But getting to the executive meetings is something that I need to lock in sort of now, and it's kind of become something I didn't probably factor in is the executive meetings also changed from weekly to fortnightly. So there's been a few little sort of moving goalposts, but nothing that can't be managed. But that may be something that the time period that internal audit is going to be undertaken might need to be shifted slightly.
Yeah. I think it's important just to keep the conversation with the internal audit team, but then also good to have something in draft for them to review as opposed to them just, coming up with from scratch. At least you'll have time to think about it, and then, you can bounce ideas off them to get, a good result. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions or comments? No. I completely understand, the delay with everything else that's been going on, competing priorities, the mayor stepping down and all that. So there has been a lot going on. It's not like it's been smooth sailing. So, and I was thinking too with the, because I think our next audit committee meeting not till November. So see how you go, if we need to have another meeting in there just to go through some policies, because I have done that before in audit and risk committees, that there's been 10 policies put up and you can't, it's too much reading. So I'd rather break it into a couple of meetings than try and do it all in one meeting. So I'm happy to meet between now and November if that helps you out, just to get that done. Hopefully everyone else agrees with me. Yep.
There is one policy that was scheduled for the July meeting that isn't within the governance space.
Okay.
And that one is one we actually, I think, need to have in place by around September. So that's the safe environment in policy, and it relates to the swimming pool needs to have it to be able to hold vac swim. So I did, when I spoke with Chris about the meeting and things, flag with him that particular one, if we are under time pressures to get that through to the department, we could potentially put that one, and he was happy to, let's see how we go and put that one straight to council if Yep.
Or happy for you to distribute it out of session, like we're happy to do a review and provide any feedback if you want.
That would be fantastic, thank you.
So just to keep it moving. All right, there's no other questions, comments. Have I got a mover for 7.2? Ben, good work. Seconder, Christine, all in favour? Carried unanimously. Okay, 7.3 is the governance compliance update for the fourth quarter for FY25. Is that back to you, Susie?
Through the chair, I'm glad I paused my work on sub-delegations pending the expenditure policy being adopted, because it's not just those positions that no longer have sub-delegation that will need revoking of any instruments I've already issued, but with the expenditure policy going through, it'll be good because there's 18 less positions that will have sub-delegations. So in the long run, it will reduce work. But because of the structure change in the schedule that has occurred on the previous version, where we've stripped, instead of having, transaction limits that apply across the board to all managers or all team leaders, it's been broken up into really looking at the key needs of each position. So the manager level 1 positions that require that higher level budget, where manager level 2 less so. That means that all of the instruments of sub-delegation I've issued since the big review in February and the update need to be reissued to reflect the changes to this. So I'm pleased that of the different pieces of compliance work that fall within governance, I did sort of foreshadow that there would be some sort of back to the drawing board, not completely, but so that the instruments, particularly within relation to the delegation of financial expenditure, can reference this. They'll need to be updated across the board. However, I guess the work done in that space is not lost, because I've done a lot of cleaning up of the system and making sure that all the position titles are correct. Also liaising a bit with HR about when position titles are suggested, because it's not just HR that have to update things. The sub-delegations are to positions, so if there's not a real need to do a position title change, let's save everyone a whole lot of work just for the sake of it. The confidential orders, I have released about half of the documents onto the website. It's a bit of a tedious process because you have to ensure that when you extract from your PDF the minutes, or minutes particularly, that you are redacting anything not related to what's being released. A member of the public had contacted governance not so long ago, a little while ago, and had come across a document that's had the confidential watermark. It was the confidential meeting agenda, and thought it had been uploaded in error to the website. So I've now developed some watermarks that I apply to documents prior to uploading, that clearly on the front at the top say released from confidence, and the resolution number and the meeting date. As well as a watermark across where the confidential watermark is applied, just saying released, so that there's no mistaking if you accidentally sort of just do a Google search and come across a document that actually it's meant to be there, it's been released from confidence. That is the section of the website I upload them to. But if you're just doing a random Google search and not navigating through council's website, you may just, the result may just, you might just land on one, and I think that's something I haven't done previously at councils, but I think it's quite a good decision to and that was something that came about just because a gentleman from Parafield had come across a document on the web that he thought, I better let them know they've accidentally put a confidential one on the website. So it does take a little bit more time. It's tedious in the respect that it's something you cannot get wrong, because if you accidentally put something that's still retained in confidence on the web, it's out there. And so have made definite progress on that. So I'm pleased to say that that will be concluded soon. I'm trying to think, because I couldn't get my report off the printer, what other things I captured in there. There's been some extra additional reports that have come through. Obviously, the arrangements for the mayor was one that went up to the last council meeting, and I think once the nomination sort of period kicks off shortly, as the liaison person with EXA, that some of that will potentially, I'm trying to get all of the regular BAU stuff as up to date as possible before that work hits. Yeah, so I'll take any questions on anything specific, but as you've noted, it's been a busy time for finance and governance as well.
Yeah. I was just having a look at with the registers, and you're saying, the gifts and benefits register, that there wasn't a whole lot to declare. So just as long as you're confident that there's because there's stuff not in there that people know what they need to declare.
So we put out communications to members and staff via the communique prior to Christmas, post-Christmas. I have, when new staff members have a governance induction, it's one of the items we cover off, that if there's any gift or benefit that they receive through the course of their role, and if they're not sure, to come and speak to me or their manager and to seek some guidance. So we try and cover off of it right at the start as well, but have done about 3 communications, I think, since just prior to Christmas. So some members have historically chosen to declare items that are under the $50, which is the limit set by the local government minister per the Gazette, but that's their personal choice. But anything that is estimated $50 or over must be declared. But yeah, I'm not really too sure, apart from those regular sort of, and to try to be strategic, like in the lead up to Christmas, when it happens less in local government, much less than it used to. That different corporations and businesses would flood clients with gifts. It's not so prevalent, and I think when that does happen to a small amount, quite often, I know in the staff register, apart from conferences or things that you might get a ticket to because you've been drawn out of a hat to go to a one-day conference or something like that. Any gifts are generally, we have a few raffles that are held for different causes, worthy causes, and often staff donate something to be raffled in a fundraiser, so that's quite good. It's very difficult to say for certain, because obviously you have to rely on people. I did have one question from a member just before the end of the year, because we've updated it quite. The provision of advice, I can put it on the register if they just provide me the details. Here's a little snippet what I need. And I did have one the previous quarter, the value was under the $50 and that member chose not to declare it, which they don't have, it's not mandatory. So there have been inquiries, it's just...
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
I think, doing internal audits sort of, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, these lists used to be huge, and I think it's the change in behaviour, both in local and state government, that no one, gives presents anymore. So that's fine. Are there any questions or comments on that? Councillor Davies?
Yeah, so just Well, firstly, just on that, I think, yeah, I don't think I've ever encountered a sort of, I don't know, a gift situation. I think it's usually more of a service club handover dinner or something, and you're like, is this meal worth $30 or $60 or, I don't know, you know, being invited over, but yeah, I don't, I think probably some people probably do need to be reminded there's a few things that might be on the edge in terms of just being invited over for a meal or something like that, but I just haven't encountered anything that's just no one's come up on the street and given me $1,000, so.
Otherwise you'd be declaring it.
Yes. But just in terms of a question around the upcoming by-election, how much of the responsibility for all of the declarations and gift registers and all that for candidates is in governance's hand, or is it all the Electoral Commission?
Good question, and through you, Chair. The local government reforms that we introduced over a period of about 3 years in various different stages also encompassed some changes to the Elections Act. This is the first election, as I was on some extended leave for the last periodic election, that I would have worked with the changes, and some of them have only come in post then, where EXA has more responsibility for some of the tasks than they historically have had before, which I think is a good thing, because I didn't see it as a role of a council necessarily to do some of those tasks that were very labour intensive, especially as it was often governance staff at councils doing those tasks. So if whoever's successful then gets on council, it's to me it was the neutral body's responsibility. So one example is unsuccessful candidates and having to chase them down in some circumstances, and I say that with all due respect because that's the circumstance I had at my previous council. You've got no relationship with that person if they haven't been on council. They don't really know you, you don't know them, and having to, you know, contact repeatedly and send registered mail and things to get a campaign donations return with someone that's got that, you know, they've nominated and run, but there's not that connection. So that's one example of a task where at the time I thought it was quite ludicrous in a way that a council was expected to do that, and it didn't sit with EXA as the authority managing the election. So a lot of the nomination process now is completely online, so there's no more counting someone who's come in with their printed out and signed version and giving it to me over the counter and me counting words and then scanning it in and emailing it to EXA and EXA checking it to make sure it's a valid nominate. I think that process should be more streamlined. Because it's a postal ballot, I do think potentially, and they haven't rolled out any of the training that they usually do for the liaison person, I don't know if they just send you a bit of a refresher from previous ones that you've done. I haven't been involved in a supplementary election before, so it's my first one, but I would say that there will still be a reissue of ballots provision that may be required to be undertaken, which is where someone basically comes in and says, I haven't got my ballot papers and I should be on the roll because of X, Y and Z, and having a supply essentially of ballot papers that are signed off from EXA. So that may still be a function we have to have because it's a bit hard to expect people to go into EXA and get ballot papers if it's say 2 days before and they've just gone, actually I should have been on the roll but I'm not, and there has been an omission. So that I think is something that there'll still be some tasks required. So it'll be interesting. I do think potentially the changes, taking some of the responsibilities and EXA maintaining them, I get that we still pay for all of that, but I think it leaves council staff out of it, which I think is actually the best, cleanest process in my mind.
Acting Mayor Shanks.
So just around, I guess, when we talk about risk, the obvious risk I can see is supplementary election being one of those special projects that we haven't necessarily planned for, and it can be admin heavy. So what strategies are we implementing now just to understand what business as usual work is critical path items and what are deferrable items? And is it one of those positions where we need to look at bringing in an extra external to assist us through some of those critical path items that aren't negotiable?
So I briefly flagged with Chris week before the camera, and it's probably going to be a bit of a touch point. Renee and I have had discussions where I've sort of said in the governance space, you know, I'm pretty well at capacity. And so we've looked at, I have also had some discussions with HR because I've been affected by leave on both sides, if I can and put it by that, of staff in the governance space. I need to have a follow-up conversation with Chris because there's certain things, I guess, as a new CEO, I'm not exactly sure on exactly. I want to make sure that priorities are in accordance with what his priorities for me to be focusing on are as well. And so, yeah, it probably needs a follow-up with him. And that's where I guess these date changes, because everything is so carefully, like it's a fine line, and then if 2 weeks sort of get pulled, it's very difficult to try and make that up. And I hated writing that report, just to say that. But yes, it's a very good question, and something definitely I need to follow up and have a more in-depth discussion where I've sort of got the work sort of laid out, the spreadsheet, whatever. I've got a work plan spreadsheet, so I can see where he would like me to focus my attentions on the real key elements.
Just a follow-up comment, I guess. Again, I use the terminology special project because it really is a special project that we didn't actually think we're going to be undertaking. So in history, when we've actually taken on special projects, if you look at anything, you turn around and almost contract in for that special project and then downgrade after the special project's finished. You know, I know what governance journey we're on and I know what momentum we're gathering at the moment. Personally, I'd hate to see some of that momentum die off, because what ends up happening is we lose some of the efficiencies of the overlap and the work plan. So looking at it from a pure business point of view and managing risk, personally, I'd like to almost see the option put on the table of bringing someone in to help manage that special project, and we can focus on business as usual as well with that secondary assistance. Not something I've talked to Chris about, but just as an audit and risk, trying to manage risk, that would be something that I would entertain the conversation, listening to our governance officer talk about losing people within. And then if you do bring in a contractor to assist with the business as usual thing, you actually find yourself wrapped up in trying to get them through their apprenticeship. No matter who the contractor is, it can be really, really valuable, but trying to teach them your systems rather than, hey, this is the special project we've got. You've got some experience here. I need you to run with it.
Yeah. I suppose, do you want to say something first and then I'll... Here you go.
Respond and say it's a little bit of an unknown quantity, and that's in itself, I guess, a bit of a risk. And so I think a sit-down conversation with Chris, because of the changes to the Act, there is a lot less responsibility. So I'm not saying that an election of any kind would completely mean we've got no touch points, but I'm unsure myself as to what it's exactly going to eventuate and look like. I think that council as a whole, staff will incur the usual increased inquiries about for different information and things like that that generally happen. I guess one good thing is it's only for one position. Caretaker provisions don't apply as they do in a in a periodic election where all positions are obviously vacant and up for nomination. So I don't need to do the rigorous training that I have delivered in other years at other councils in the lead up to it. Members will probably get some touch points just to remind them of the use of council resources, because although caretaker provisions might not explicitly relate to a supplementary election, the cover is in the Local Government Act section 58 or 59 from memory, where it talks about the use of council resources for personal gain. And that's where the Act picks up a supplementary election in terms of the responsibilities of any current members that are also candidates. So you'll get some communication on that, but it's definitely not to the extent of a periodic. So I will still absolutely sit down with Chris and we'll just map out what we think.
Because I'm just thinking with the supplementary election, if there are things that you can do now that help set you up for next year, because I know that that's what we're doing at Adelaide, is that, you know, you can get some processes in place, especially if you get and have a look at, voter rolls and all that kind of thing. So I think, you need to do it even though it's a supplementary election, I think you can actually get some leverage for next year, which would be good. The other thing I'm thinking, and it might be a silly question, but with the policies and procedures, you can't get council to sign off on them, but can you draft them during caretaker mode? Like, is that something, is it almost flipping around, and talk to Chris about it, but is it flipping around the responsibilities, like, focusing on the supplementary election, working out the procedure ready for next year's full election, and then pushing some of those procedures back, it'd be after the internal audit's conducted, and then when you're in caretaker mode, because management will have a little bit more capacity to meet with you and to do that while you're in caretaker mode. I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the sort of thing.
Yeah. So have a talk to Chris about it, but I think you can swap them around a bit just with priorities, because I think it's if you do it the other way around, it might work. It's my 2 cents.
Yeah. Cool. You're 100% correct with the forward planning for elections. I've got some resources that I've used in previous councils, but yes, I started at least really quite detailed planning 12 months out. So this is kind of a good, it's like an entree. And so yes, absolutely starting to work up some of those things.
Well, and you can get all, what we're doing is, you can get all the comms in place and kind of, review all, your information packs and that, and then you can just roll them.
Yeah, I've already spoken to Chris as well, and the supplementary election did sort of trigger some of those discussions of what past practices have generally been at Town of Gawler, because I have personal views, but they're my views, but I wanted to see what Chris sort of was, what his views were about different things like meet the candidate nights and things like that. So that I knew kind of a little bit about what to sort of work up into a draft of some of the things we need to look at and schedule in. Yep.
Cool. All right, are there any other comments or questions? Nope. Okay, so I have, 7.3? I've got a mover. I'll move it. Seconder, Ben will second it. All in favour? Carried unanimously. All right, 7.4 is the internal audit update. Does someone want to talk to this on behalf of Nathan? You'll do it, Renee?
Thank you. Through the Chair, this report provides an update on the internal audit program. 2 internal audits were completed in 2024-25, and there's 2 scheduled for 25-26. These audits are the contracts management review, which is currently underway and expected to be presented to the committee in November. And then we've got the policy framework review, which is scheduled for early 2026. The committee is asked to note the update, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. We got any questions or comments? No? No questions? Ben?
I did have one. In relation to the contract management review, it talks about assessing contract performance during the bidding and awarding stages. I'm just wondering what that means exactly.
That's me.
Sorry.
It's very important stuff.
We have a little fight sometimes. I think it means like previous performance of those contractors. So it may be the stuff they're putting in regarding their experience and referees, but it could also be if we have appropriate records, and we've used those contractors before, how we can bring that into the tender process, because if you don't have the appropriate records, then you can't really bring it through. Yeah, so it's quite a complex situation to manage when it comes to previous performance of contractors that have worked for council before. But I think this contract management review is going to be, I'm actually really excited about it because I want it to show us where we're lacking and where we can really, build on our current framework to improve our processes. Yeah.
Yep. Cool. Any other questions or comments? No? I think, as we touched on before with the policy framework review, just working out the timing of that and the scope of that. See where you're up to before they start that in, you've got it penciled in for February. But is that more of, working with you rather than reviewing it? Is it kind of because you can shape your internal audit. It doesn't have to be an assessment of everything. You can actually work with the internal auditors, because I'm assuming they've seen a lot of policy frameworks for local government, and that they can help build and enhance one. Then you can go and implement it. So work out how the best way for them to work with you rather than against you, if that makes sense. Yep, cool. All right, I've got a mover for 7.4. Christine, thank you. Seconder, Ben, all in favour? Carry unanimously. Cool. Item 8 is item listed for discussion, which there are none. Then 9 is, scroll down. Is there any questions without notice? No. Item 10, motions without notice? None. Item 11, we'll close the meeting at 7:54. Hey. And that our next ordinary meeting is Tuesday, as usual, Tuesday the 4th of November, which is Melbourne Cup Day, isn't it? It's always Melbourne Cup Day. Every year. And yeah, we'll see whether there's going to be a meeting between now and then. Cool. Thanks, everyone. Did you? Oh, wow. There you go. Right. Is it heavy, light? 1.7 kilos. Oh,